Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to really explore this fascinating world of mental health.
Absolutely.
You guys gave us some really cool material
for
this deep dive.
It is.
We've got Dr. Daniel Amen's book, The End of Mental Illness, and this psychological thriller, The Housemaid.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of go back and forth between the science of mental health and the lived experience of mental health.
I think that'll be really illuminating.
Yeah, and Dr. Amen, he's known for his work with brain imaging.
Yes.
So I'm kind of curious to see what he has to say about that and how that relates to everything.
Yeah.
But let's start with this idea that he puts forth right at the beginning of the book where he says we should reframe this whole conversation.
Oh, yeah.
From mental illness to brain health.
I think that's so important.
What do you think about that?
I mean, just that shift in language can make such a huge difference.
Totally.
For people.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you say mental illness,
it
immediately has all this baggage.
Right.
You know?
That sounds scary.
It sounds scary. It sounds permanent.
Yeah.
It sounds like something's wrong with you.
Yeah, like a character flaw almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it creates so much stigma.
Yeah.
People don't want to talk about it.
Right.
They don't want to seek help.
Exactly.
But when you say brain health, it's like suddenly it's medical.
Right.
It's something that you can, address.
It's treatable.
It's treatable.
Yeah, it's like any other part of your body.
Oh, exactly.
Like you can take care of your brain.
Yeah.
It's like you take care of your heart and your lungs.
And Dr. Amen, he really emphasizes that. Mental health challenges, they're medical issues, not personal failings. And I think that's just so crucial for people to hear.
Because it takes away that shame.
Yes.
And that blame.
Absolutely.
Because so many people feel.
And I think it also gives people hope.
Yeah.
Totally. If it's a brain health issue.
Right.
Then there's something you can do about it.
Exactly.
There are treatments.
There are things you can try.
There are lifestyle changes you can make to improve your brain health.
Absolutely. And he really, he talks about this throughout the book.
Yeah.
But he also delves into kind of the history.
The history of mental illness?
Of how we got here.
Yeah.
Like, how did we even get to this point?
That's so interesting.
Where we're talking about this as mental illness.
Right.
Versus, something else.
Yeah, like what were the perceptions back in the day?
I know. He talks about everything.
Oh, my gosh.
From, ancient trephination.
What?
Drilling holes in people's skulls.
Right. Oh, my God.
To let out the evil spirits.
Right. They thought that, Wow.
Mental illness was caused by demons.
Yeah.
And evil spirits.
That's wild.
So they would drill holes.
It's scary.
In people's heads.
Yeah.
To try to release those spirits.
I mean, it's amazing that people survived that.
I know. And it's so disturbing to think about.
It is.
The level of misunderstanding and fear.
It's just a lack of knowledge about the brain.
Absolutely.
How it works.
But it makes you realize how far we've come.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Right.
We don't
do that.
We don't drill holes in people's heads.
Yeah.
But then he also talks about more recent but still questionable practices.
Like lobotomies. Oh my gosh.
Which is essentially severing connections in the brain.
Right.
And that was supposed to cure all sorts of mental illnesses.
It's so barbaric.
It is. And it's
when you think about it.
It's shocking that that was considered an acceptable treatment.
For so long.
Right.
It's really disturbing.
It is. And it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
What are we doing now?
Right.
That in 50 years, people are going to look back and be like, oh, my God, how could you?
Barbaric.
Yeah, how barbaric.
That is a good point.
Right. It makes you think.
Yeah.
About what we might be getting wrong.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. And that's what I think is so compelling about Dr. Amen's work is that he's really trying to push the boundaries of our understanding of the brain.
Yeah.
And he's using this technology called brain SPECT imaging.
Yes.
And this is where I think it gets really interesting.
Tell me more about that.
So it's basically like a brain scan that shows you blood flow.
Okay.
And activity patterns.
Interesting.
In the brain.
Okay.
So it's like taking a picture.
Of what's happening inside.
Oh, wow.
And he uses this to diagnose and treat mental health conditions.
So he can actually see.
He can see what's going on.
What's going on in the brain.
Yeah, and he talks about how different mental health challenges have different brain patterns.
So like depression would look different than anxiety on a brain scan.
On a brain scan, and ADHD would look different.
Wow.
From,
that's fascinating.
PTSD.
So it's not just like a one-size-fits-all diagnosis.
It's very specific.
It's like personalized medicine for the brain.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And he shares some really compelling case studies in the book to kind of illustrate this.
Okay.
Like there's this one case of this young boy named Jarrett. And Jarrett has ADHD.
Okay.
And they did a brain scan, and they saw this pattern of overactivity in certain areas of his brain.
Okay.
And that explained why traditional stimulants weren't working for him.
Oh, wow.
They were actually making things worse.
Really?
Yeah.
Because
he was already overactive.
Wow.
And then they were giving him stimulants, which were making it even more overactive.
Interesting.
And so they were able to...
So they had to...
Yeah, they had to come up with a different treatment plan.
Yeah.
Based on his brain scan.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That you can actually see that.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Like you would think... Stimulants would help someone with ADHD.
Yeah.
But in his case...
Yeah.
It was actually the opposite.
Wow.
So I think it's a good illustration of how brain imaging can really...
It can
challenge our assumptions about what's going on,
Like a window into the brain.
It's like a window into the brain. So we can actually see what's happening and tailor the treatment to the individual.
To the individual.
Rather than just, using a one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly.
And so I think that's one of the
That's so cool.
things that I'm most excited to explore in this deep dive. You're like, how can we use this knowledge of the brain to actually improve people's lives?
That's the ultimate goal.
And that's what Dr. Amen, he's all about that.
Yeah.
Like he wants to end mental illness.
He wants to end mental illness.
Yeah, and he thinks that by understanding the brain, we can actually do that.
And it's not just about medication. It's about lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's about all these different factors that contribute to brain health. And
he lays out these 12 guiding principles in the book for improving brain health.
Yeah.
And these are like
a roadmap.
A roadmap, yeah. For understanding how the brain works.
Okay.
And what we can do to take care of it.
So what are some of those principles?
Well, he talks about the importance of understanding brain regions. Like the different parts of the brain and how they function. He also talks about the interconnectedness of the brain, like how no part of the brain works in isolation.
It's all connected.
Everything's connected. And that's why, seemingly unrelated symptoms can sometimes be linked to a common underlying brain issue.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's super fascinating.
Yeah.
And then he also talks about this concept called brain reserve.
Brain reserve?
Yeah. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. What is that?
So it's basically like the brain's ability to withstand challenges and bounce back from setbacks.
Okay.
So think of it like a savings account for your brain.
Interesting.
The more you invest in your brain health through healthy lifestyle choices, the more brain reserve you build up, which protects you from future decline.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like you're building up.
You're building resilience in your brain.
So, even if you do experience some kind of brain injury or trauma or stress, you're more likely to
recover.
Yeah, to recover and to not have as severe consequences.
I like that analogy of the savings account.
Yeah.
It's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And so
we want to be making deposits.
We want to be making deposits into our brain's savings account.
Right.
Exactly. And
withdrawals happen.
Yeah. But we want to make sure.
But if you're constantly withdrawing.
Yeah.
And you're not making any deposits.
Then you're going
to be in trouble.
Yeah. You're going to be bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly.
Brain bankrupt. That's a good one.
And so
So how do we make those deposits?
That's a great question. And that's where I think this is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
He introduces this thing called the Bright Minds approach.
Bright Minds?
Yeah.
What is that?
And this is an acronym.
Okay.
It stands for biological retirement aging.
Okay.
Inflammation. Genetics.
Okay.
Head trauma.
Okay.
Toxins.
Mind storms.
Yeah.
That sounds intense.
It is.
What is that?
Immunity infections.
Okay.
Neurohormone issues.
Okay.
Diabetes.
Yeah. Okay.
And sleep.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But those are all the factors.
It's a comprehensive approach to brain health.
That can affect your brain health.
Yeah, and he dedicates a chapter to each of these elements, explaining how they can impact brain health.
Right.
And contribute to mental health challenges.
So he's really looking at it from all angles.
From all angles. Yeah. It's a holistic approach.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's not just focusing on one thing.
Right.
It's looking at the whole picture.
The whole picture.
Yeah.
The whole person.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Because our bodies and our minds are all connected.
Yeah.
So you can't just treat one thing in isolation.
Right.
You have to look at the whole system.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
So how does this all tie into The Housemaid?
I'm so glad you asked because as we delve into the Bright Minds approach, we're going to see how each of these factors might be playing out in Millie's life.
In the character's life?
In Millie's life, yeah.
Okay.
So the main character.
The housemaid.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be looking at, is she a victim of circumstance? Is she a master manipulator?
Yeah.
Is she...
A little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think by using this Bright Minds framework, we can really start to understand like the complexities of her character and her situation.
And how these different factors might be influencing her choices.
Your behaviors. So let's start with the first B.
The first B.
In Bright Minds.
Okay.
Which is biological.
Biological.
What are some of the key biological factors that can impact mental health?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, you know, Dr. Amen, he talks about
genetics.
Genetics, family history.
It's family history.
You know, if your parents or grandparents had mental health challenges, you might be more likely
at a higher risk
to develop them yourself.
Yeah, and he gives some statistics in the book that are kind of alarming.
Like what?
Like, for example, if one parent has bipolar disorder, the child has a 25% chance of developing the condition.
That's significant.
Yeah.
That's really significant.
If both parents have it, it goes up even higher.
Wow. So genetics plays a big role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also emphasizes that genes are not destiny.
Right.
Just because you have a genetic predisposition doesn't mean
you're doomed.
You're doomed to develop that condition.
Right. It's not a guarantee.
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
And he uses this great analogy.
Okay.
He says, genes load the gun.
Okay.
But your environment and lifestyle pull the trigger.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So even if you have that genetic vulnerability, there are things you can do to reduce your risk.
To mitigate that risk. Yeah.
And so he talks about things like early screening, lifestyle modifications, and targeted supplements.
Yeah.
That can help.
To kind of balance things out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And reduce the likelihood of developing a condition.
So it's about being proactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so thinking about Millie in The Housemaid, we don't know a lot about.
We don't know much about her family history.
Her background.
But we do know that she's been through.
She's had a rough life.
Some trauma.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And
that could have affected her brain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trauma.
Trauma can have a huge impact.
On brain health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like long-term effects.
Yeah. And so, her time in prison, for example, likely exposed her
to a lot of stress.
To stressful situations.
Yeah.
To potentially dangerous situations.
Right.
And
that can change.
Yeah. Brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Brain function.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it makes you wonder how much of her
behavior,
current behavior, is rooted in those past experiences.
In her past. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Definitely.
Is she
acting out?
Yeah.
Fear?
Is she?
Is it survival instincts?
Yeah.
Is it something more calculated?
Yeah. Is she manipulating?
We don't know.
Yeah. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah. And then
that's just one.
Yeah, that's just one biological factor.
Yeah.
But
there are other.
He talks about head trauma.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and how
head injuries
can really
mess with your brain.
Can have a significant impact on brain function.
Even if they seem minor. Minor.
Yeah. Like he shares some pretty sobering statistics about concussions.
Yeah.
He estimates that
50 million.
50 million Americans.
Wow.
Have suffered at least one concussion.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And many of those...
And they go undiagnosed.
Yeah. Untreated.
Right.
And so
what happened.
He talks about how even a mild concussion can disrupt brain circuitry, leading to problems with...
Like what kind of problem?
Like concentration.
Okay.
Memory.
Yeah.
Mood.
Standard. Yeah.
And even personality.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's scary.
You're going to have lasting consequences.
Yeah.
And so
it's not something to mess around with.
No. And he
talks about Gary Busey.
He talks about Gary Busey, yeah.
Yeah. Motorcycle accident.
Had that motorcycle accident.
And his behavior totally changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he
had brain scans.
They did brain scans.
Yeah.
And they could see.
And you could see.
The evidence. The trauma.
Wow.
Yeah. And so...
But that's a pretty extreme example.
It's an extreme example.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good illustration of
how serious it can be.
How serious it can be. Yeah. And so
this makes me think about Millie.
Oh, yeah. Remember she had that confrontation with Nina.
And hit her head.
Where she was pushed.
Yeah.
And hit her head.
Right.
And it wasn't like it
wasn't a major injury.
Major injury.
Yeah.
But it was enough to
cause concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she kind of brushed it off.
She did.
At the time.
Yeah.
But what if that minor head injury...
What if it did have an effect? Is contributing to some of her
behavior,
erratic behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point.
It's something to consider.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he talks about how sometimes you don't see
the symptoms
right away.
Right away.
They can manifest later.
Like down the road.
Yeah. Wow. So it might be something
it could be
that, seems minor at the time.
Yeah.
But then years later, you start having these
problems. Yeah.
And you don't even connect it.
You don't connect
to that past injury.
That's scary.
Yeah. So it's really important to
be aware of that.
To be aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And to take head injuries seriously.
Take head injuries seriously.
Yeah.
Even if they seem
minor.
Minor at the time.
Yeah. So we've just scratched the surface. Of the biological factor.
And already seeing how it might be.
How it might be playing a role.
Playing out in Millie's story.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to...
The rest of Bright Minds.
That's
exciting.
I know.
I'm ready for more.
I am too. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah, we have.
Talking about the biological factor in Bright Minds.
Genetics, head trauma,
yeah.
Big ones.
But there's so much more to unpack.
So much more.
With this...
Where do we go next?
Bright Minds approach.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the R.
The R!
Which is retirement and aging. And this might seem
a little off topic. Since we're talking about Millie, who's not exactly a senior citizen.
Not exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's all connected.
It is connected.
Yeah.
And Dr. Amen, he really emphasizes that as we age, our brains naturally undergo changes.
Yeah. Right. Things slow down.
A
little bit.
We might have a little bit more trouble remembering things.
Forget where you put your keys.
Our processing speed might decline a little bit.
But he doesn't present it.
But he doesn't present it as like
a doomsday scenario.
Like, oh, you're doomed.
Right.
Once you hit a certain age.
It's inevitable that your brain is going to turn to mush.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's not saying that at all.
No.
What he's saying is...
that
age-related decline isn't inevitable.
Right.
Like there are things...
There are things we can do. To protect our brains. As we get older.
Yeah.
And even improve our brain function.
Yeah. As
we age.
Talking about the importance of...
Maintaining cognitive function.
Yeah. And reducing the risk of dementia. Yeah.
Alzheimer's.
And
those things.
All those things. And he even shares research from his clinic.
Okay.
Showing that brain aging patterns can be significantly influenced
by lifestyle
choices.
Wow. So what we do matters.
What we do matters. Yeah. And so
makes sense.
He talks about things like exercise, mental stimulation.
Keep your brain active.
Keep your brain active.
Yeah.
And a healthy diet.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Like those things can
make a big difference.
Make a huge difference.
In how our brains age.
Yeah. And he brings up
brain reserve again.
Brain reserve again, yeah.
I love that concept.
Yeah.
It's so helpful.
And he emphasizes that.
That the more we invest
in our brain health.
Throughout our lives.
The better
equipped we are.
Yeah.
To handle
the challenges of aging.
Yeah. So it's like
building a strong foundation.
Yeah. So that your house can withstand the storms.
I
like that.
Yeah. And so
even though
Millie's not.
You
know, in her retirement years.
Yeah.
This concept of brain reserve.
Yeah.
Makes me think about
the stress.
The accumulated stress.
That she's under.
That she's carrying.
Yeah.
She's dealing with a lot. Poverty. Aftermath of prison.
A very tense living situation. Yeah.
All of that.
It's like chronic stress. Yeah.
Could be depleting her brain reserve.
Yeah.
Making her more vulnerable.
Yeah.
To making bad decisions.
To impulsive decisions.
Yeah.
Emotional outbursts. All those things.
Yeah. It's like she's
constantly withdrawing. From her brain's savings account.
From that savings account.
Yeah.
Without making any deposits.
Yeah. And so that's going to catch up with her. Eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay, so that's retirement and aging.
Yeah,
let's move on to eye inflammation.
Woo! Yeah. And this is
a big one.
A hot topic these days.
Everybody's talking about inflammation.
Yeah. But what's particularly interesting is how Dr. Amen links it
to the brain.
To brain health.
Yeah. Because we think about inflammation as like
in your joints.
In your body. Yeah.
But he's saying
it can affect your brain. And
that's kind of a new concept.
For
a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he explains that chronic inflammation can actually damage brain cells. Yeah. And disrupt
the delicate balance.
Of
neurotransmitters.
Yeah. And so
it's like a fire. Smoldering in the brain. Slowly but steadily causing damage.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And
inflammation
can contribute to
a whole range. Mental health symptoms.
Yeah.
From depression.
Anxiety. Brain fog.
Difficulty concentrating.
All of those things.
Oh.
And so
it's really important.
To
address inflammation.
If you're struggling with mental health.
Yeah. And how
do we do that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And he talks about
diet.
Yeah. He talks about
gut health.
The gut-brain connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
It is.
You know,
because we don't always think
about
the gut affecting our brain.
Yeah. But
it's all connected.
It is.
Yeah.
And he talks about
the microbiome. All those little bacteria in our gut can actually influence
the inflammation
throughout the body.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so
what we eat matters. Yeah.
Yeah. And he even recommends
an elimination diet. Which can be tough.
But it can be helpful.
It can be really helpful.
Yeah.
For some people.
To identify food sensitivities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might be
triggering.
Triggering inflammation. Yeah.
So it's like
detective work.
For your gut. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
thinking about Millie.
Yeah. What is she eating? Right. We know she's
struggling financially. She can't afford organic, grass-fed.
She's probably eating
everything.
A lot of processed foods.
Fast food.
Things that are
cheap and easy.
And those things are
typically high in
things that cause inflammation.
Unhealthy fats. Processed ingredients.
Yeah. All the things that we want to avoid.
Yeah.
And so So her diet is probably contributing to her inflammation.
Contributing to inflammation.
Which is then affecting her brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle.
Chronic stress.
Leads
to poor
dietary choices.
Which fuels inflammation.
Which
then contributes to more stress. Yeah.
And it just keeps going.
Like a downward spiral.
And so
it's really important to break that cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
where
one of the things that I think is so powerful.
Yeah.
About Dr. Amen's approach.
Yeah.
Is that he's
giving us tools.
To
break that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
That's inflammation.
Okay, what's next?
Let's move on to G.
Genetics.
Genetics again.
Yeah.
We touched on this earlier.
Yeah. We talked about family history. But now we're going to go to
It goes into more detail.
A little deeper,
yeah.
Okay.
About
specific genes.
Okay. That can
increase your risk.
Increase the risk of
mental health challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, and he talks about genes.
Like what kind of genes?
Involved in neurotransmitter production and breakdown.
Like the MTHFR gene. Yeah.
And the COMT gene.
The COMT gene?
Yeah, have you heard of those?
I've heard of MTHFR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
what do those genes do?
He explains how variation in these genes can impact things like
mood
regulation, attention,
impulsivity.
Yeah. Okay, so those are all
really important.
Yeah.
For mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so can you get tested for those genes?
He suggests getting tested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that way you can know your risk factors.
And you can take a more personalized approach. Yeah.
To your mental health.
To managing your mental health.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I like that.
And so
But
again, he emphasizes that genes are not destiny.
Right.
Just because
you have
a certain gene
doesn't mean you're going to develop the disease.
Yeah, the condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not like a death sentence.
It's not a death sentence.
Yeah.
But it's good to know. So you can
be aware.
Yeah. And
take steps.
To
mitigate those risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
thinking about Millie.
Yeah. Again.
Then we don't know her genetic background. Yeah.
But this makes me think about.
It makes me think about the possibility.
The potential.
Of generational trauma. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like maybe.
Or maybe her family.
Her family has a history.
Of
mental health challenges. Or addiction.
And that could be influencing her. Current
struggles.
Yeah. Even if she's not aware of it. Yeah.
And even if she doesn't have specific genetic
vulnerabilities.
The stress and trauma that she's experienced.
Could be affecting her genes.
Epigenetically. Affecting
I've heard that.
her gene expression.
What is that?
Yeah. So it's basically so our experiences
can actually change.
Can change
how our genes are expressed.
The way our genes are expressed.
So it's not just about the genes themselves.
The genes themselves.
It's about
how they're
turned on and off.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And so that's why, our experiences really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can have a lasting impact. On our health and well-being.
On our genes.
On our genes, yeah.
Oh.
Wow. And so.
Okay, so that's genetics.
That's genetics.
What about H?
H, head trauma. Which we talked about.
We talked about Millie's fall.
In relation to Millie's fall.
Yeah. But he goes into more detail.
Dr. Ammon goes into more detail
about the long-term consequences.
Of head injuries. Yeah. And he discusses conditions like
post-concussion syndrome. Yeah. Which can cause all sorts of problems.
It can cause persistent headaches. Dizziness. Difficulty concentrating. Emotional instability.
Wow. So it's not just about the immediate symptoms. It can have long-term
effects. Yeah. And so.
And he also points out that head trauma
can increase
the risk of developing of developing mental health conditions.
Like depression.
Like depression, anxiety, PTSD.
That's scary.
Yeah. And so
it's really important.
He emphasizes the importance of
early intervention.
And rehabilitation.
Yeah.
To minimize
the long-term impact.
Of
these injuries. And so
thinking about Millie again.
Yeah. I mean, her fall might not have been severe enough
to cause a concussion.
To cause a full-blown concussion.
Yeah.
But
it's still worth considering.
How it might have affected her.
Especially
since she
didn't seek medical attention.
Yeah. She might be downplaying the impact of that fall. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those lingering symptoms? Yeah.
Could be
contributing
to her anxiety,
erratic behavior. Yeah, that's a good point. So
head injuries.
It's a reminder that head injuries
should always be taken seriously. Yeah.
Even if they seem
minor at the time.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered H. What about T?
Toxins. And this is another
interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah, because
we're exposed to toxins?
We're exposed to toxins all the time.
We don't even realize it.
No, I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dr. Amen, he argues
that our brains are very sensitive.
Our brains are incredibly sensitive to environmental toxins.
Yeah, and exposure to these
toxins
problems
can contribute to a wide range of problems.
What kind of toxins are we talking about?
He talks about everything from heavy metals.
Heavy metals like
lead.
Mercury and lead.
Okay,
to pesticides.
Pesticides?
Yeah.
Air pollution.
And even mold.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mold can be really bad.
Yeah.
For your brain.
Yeah. So it's not just about like eating healthy food. It's about the environment we're in.
Yeah. The air we breathe. The water we drink. All of that can affect our brains.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he even mentions
the
potential negative effects
of anesthesia,
of general anesthesia,
which is kind of scary.
It's kind of scary
because a lot of people have surgery
at some point
in their lives, and they don't think about
the potential effects
on their brain. Yeah.
And so
he's saying
he provides a really comprehensive list in the book of common toxins
to be aware of.
Yeah. And he offers practical tips
for reducing your exposure.
Yeah. So what can we do?
So it's about taking a proactive approach to detoxifying
your
environment, your body.
And minimizing your body's toxic burden.
Yeah. That sounds heavy.
It is heavy.
Yeah.
And so
thinking about Millie.
Yeah. In The Housemaid.
Yeah. I mean, what is she exposed to?
What is she exposed to?
In that house.
Right.
Yeah.
She's working in this
luxurious mansion.
Yeah.
But we don't know.
We don't know anything about
the
potential environmental hazards. That might be lurking there. Right.
Yeah.
Like, is there mold?
Is there mold hiding in the walls?
Are
there lead pipes?
Yeah. Is the air quality good?
Is the air quality compromised?
Yeah.
We don't know. And even if the house itself is pristine.
Is perfect.
Yeah.
She might be exposed.
Through
the cleaning products.
Through her cleaning products.
Yeah. She talks about using
harsh chemicals.
Yeah,
to scrub bathrooms and floors.
Yeah.
And, those chemicals.
Those chemicals can be toxic. Yeah.
Yeah.
They could be.
Seeping into her system. Affecting her brain.
Potentially impacting her brain health.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's another thing to think about.
It's another piece of the puzzle that we need to
keep in mind.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so that's toxins.
What
about?
Mind storms.
And
this is where it gets really intense.
Yeah.
Hey.
Dr. Amen's term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Abnormal electrical activity. In the brain.
In the brain.
Okay.
And so he explained
that our brains are electrical.
That just like electrical storms in the atmosphere.
Can disrupt weather patterns.
Yeah. Electrical storms in the brain
can disrupt
our thinking,
mood, behavior,
cognitive function.
Our mood.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And so it's like our brains are...
He uses brain SPECT imaging to identify
these electrical storms.
These patterns of abnormal electrical activity.
Okay.
And this can help.
Guide treatment. Yeah.
Yeah. And he discusses conditions.
Like epilepsy.
Yeah. Which is a...
more extreme.
Example of mind storm.
Of mind storms.
Yeah.
But he also talks about...
how... Less
dramatic forms. Of electrical instability.
Sort of electrical instability can contribute to things like...
anxiety. Irritability. Racing thoughts. Insomnia. All those things.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's not just about... seizures.
It can be these more subtle things that are still affecting our mental health.
Yeah. Bright
minds.
Yeah.
Expert.
All the things.
That's a lot. It is a lot.
But it's good stuff.
Yeah. So we've been talking about, Dr. Amen's book.
The End of Mental Illness.
Mm-hmm. And this
psychological thriller,
The Housemaid.
Yeah.
And how these two...
Yeah, how they kind of
intertwine.
Yeah. Inform each other.
Yeah, because we could use that Bright Minds framework.
The Bright Minds framework.
To look at Millie's life.
Yeah, to understand Millie.
And her behavior.
And
her choices.
Yeah. So let's
get back to the book.
Let's dive back into the book.
Yeah, where do we leave off?
Okay, so...
A lot of twists and turns.
A lot of
suspense.
Yeah, it's a real page turner.
I was on the edge of my seat.
It really keeps you guessing.
Who to trust.
Yeah.
What's really going on.
And that's what's so compelling about it.
It's that unreliable narrator.
The unreliable narrator, yeah.
You don't know.
If
Millie's telling the truth.
If she's being truthful.
Yeah.
Or if she's manipulating.
With
the Winchesters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because...
And the more we learn about her.
As we learn more about her past...
We question
her motives
and her reliability. Yeah. And so we can start to see
how those bright minds factors.
Might
be playing a role.
Yeah. Yeah. And
in her thinking.
One of the things that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Was
her anxiety.
Her constant anxiety. And fear.
She's always on edge.
Yeah. Like she's waiting for the other shoe to drop.
It's like she's living in a constant state of fear.
Yeah. And,
And given her history. It makes sense. She's been through a lot.
Yeah, she's been through trauma.
She's been to prison. She's poor. She's living in this...
She's in this weird
tense situation.
Power dynamic.
Yeah.
With...
the Winchesters.
Yeah. So it's not surprising.
It's understandable that she is
anxious. Yeah. And she talks about feeling like she's being watched.
Yeah. Judged, controlled.
Controlled both by the Winchesters.
Yeah.
And by
like
unseen forces.
From her past. Yeah. And so it's like this.
It's this paranoia.
Yeah. It's just pervasive.
And we don't know.
If
it's justified.
Or if it's
all
in her head.
Yeah. And I
think that's what makes it
so
creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're like,
is she really
in danger?
Or is she imagining things? Yeah.
And then you have Nina.
And then there's Nina.
Yeah.
The wife.
Yeah. And she's interesting.
She's a very
complex character.
Yeah. On the surface.
She seems
perfect.
She's
got it all.
She's beautiful. She's rich.
Yeah. She's wealthy.
She has this amazing house.
She's got the perfect husband.
Yeah. It seems like she has it all.
Well,
but there are
cracks in the facade.
Yeah. And we start to see
that she's not
as perfect.
As perfect as she seems.
Yeah. Well, and she's controlling. She's manipulative.
She's manipulative.
She's dismissive.
She's very dismissive.
Of Millie's feelings.
Of Millie's feelings, yeah.
Yeah.
And she seems to enjoy
exerting her power.
Exerting her power.
Over Millie.
Over Millie, yeah. And I think this
could be really triggering.
Really triggering for Millie.
For Millie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
it's...
Yeah, it could be reminding her...
Reminding her of past experiences.
Past experiences.
Of abuse.
Of powerlessness.
Yeah. Maybe even from her time in prison.
Yeah.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But it's possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And then
there's Andrew.
There's Andrew, the husband.
Yeah.
And
he's charming.
He initially comes across as very charming. Supportive. Like he
seems like the good guy.
The good guy, yeah.
Yeah. But as the story unfolds.
His behavior becomes
questionable.
Increasingly questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially
in his interactions with Millie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he starts to cross boundaries.
He crosses boundaries.
Yeah. And it's like, what is he doing?
What are his
motives? Yeah.
Yeah. And the author
does a good job.
Does a really good job.
Of keeping us
guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is he genuinely attracted to Millie?
Is he attracted to Millie?
Is he using her?
Or is he using her
for
some other purpose?
For something else.
Yeah, and we see glimpses
of his
manipulative tendencies.
In how he interacts with Nina.
With his wife.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very
subtle, but he's definitely
undermining her.
Her confidence. And isolating her. From other people.
Yeah.
So he's not a good guy.
Not a good guy.
Yeah.
No. And then Nina disappears.
Oh, yeah. That's a big turning point.
In the book.
And of course.
Everyone suspects Millie.
Because
she's the criminal record.
The criminal record?
Yeah.
And she's the outsider.
Yeah. She doesn't belong. In that world. Yeah. But as the investigation unfolds.
We start to question. Whether Nina's disappearance.
It's as straightforward.
As it seems.
Yeah. There are hints.
That Andrew might be involved. Yeah.
And Millie
starts to get suspicious.
Becomes increasingly suspicious.
Of him.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
the tension builds.
And we're trying to piece together the puzzle.
Yeah. What happened?
What happened to Nina?
Who to trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ending
is a shocker.
It's a shocker.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it.
For
people who haven't read it.
But
it's good.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
And it really reveals
the depths of Andrew's deception.
Yeah.
And how he's been manipulating everybody.
Everyone.
Nina,
Millie.
Everyone.
Yeah. And so
it's a reminder.
It's a chilling reminder.
That appearances can be deceiving.
Yeah. And
people who seem
charming, the most trustworthy, can harbor dark secrets.
Yeah. And so
what did you think of Millie?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Millie?
In the end,
is
she a victim?
Or is she a manipulator?
Or is she both?
Both. Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's hard to categorize her. Neatly. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes
her such a compelling character.
Yeah. Because she's complex.
She's been through a lot of tasks.
Shaped by her past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's making choices.
She's trying to navigate
a very treacherous present. Yeah. And so she makes some questionable choices. But she's also a victim.
Clearly a victim
under
Andrew's manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a
good reminder.
That mental health
is complicated.
And it is not black and white.
It's not black and white. There are a lot of gray areas. Yeah.
And people can be
both. Vulnerable and capable
of
harmful actions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
behavior.
Their behavior
is
often a product
of a lot of different factors.
There's a complex interplay of factors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
what we've been exploring.
We've been talking about.
With bright minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
I'd love to hear
from you.
From you, the listener.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts?
On Millie
On Millie.
Do you sympathize with her?
Yeah, do you sympathize with her?
Or do you see her as a villain?
Do you see her as more of a villain?
Yeah.
Or is she somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between. And how did the book make you feel?
The book's exploration of...
About mental health.
Mental health and manipulation. And manipulation. Resonate with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it challenge your assumptions?
Did it challenge your assumptions?
About mental illness?
About mental illness.
Yeah.
Did it make you think differently?
About the people in your life.
About the people in your life.
Who might be struggling.
Who might be struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think this book does a good job of showing the complexities of mental health.
And how we often make judgments
about people
without really understanding
their stories,
their struggles.
Their struggles.
Yeah. And so I hope this deep dive has given you some
things to think about.
Food for thought.
Food for thought, yeah.
Yeah.
About mental health.
About mental health.
About brain health.
Brain health, yeah.
And the power of storytelling. Yeah, because stories can
really
help us understand
each other, yeah. And so if there's
one takeaway,
one key takeaway from this deep dive, it's that mental health is multifaceted. It's not just one thing. Yeah, it's influenced by our biology, our environment, our experiences, our choices, all of it. Yeah. And while we can't always control the challenges that we face, yeah, we can learn to understand them. Yeah.
Seek support when needed.
Yeah.
And make choices
that promote
brain health
and resilience. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
thank you for joining us.
On this deep dive. Into the mysteries of the mind.
Yeah. Until next time. Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep taking care.
Of
your amazing brain.